Hi, I'm Martin Mulcare, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Barry Rafe. Barry was the president of the Actuaries Institute of Australia back in 2011. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you, Martin. 2011. Gee, that was a long time ago. In fact, you and I were doing the professionalism course back then, weren't we?
You kindly handed over the facilitation of the
That's right.
professionalism
Yes.
course at that time,
Oh,
which I
that's right. I did. Yeah. So I was facilitating it, and I handed it across, and I did the ethics part
that's
from
right.
there on in for quite a few years. Yeah, which was good.
That's right. And so I'm
Yeah,
indebted to you for entrusting me with the
it's good.
facilitation role. So Barry, for context for the audience, you've got a very impressive CV of extraordinary corporate and broader leadership roles. Before we talk about the president's role, perhaps you can share some of your background of serious leadership roles before you became president. Just context for the audience.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I remember I started off. I was an actuarial student. I did the exams, what we used to call the hard way, so I didn't go to university and do them. And as I went through, my first job was with AMP as an actuarial student. I trundled along there and passed a few exams and failed a few exams. And as I went through, I sort of looked at the management role as well as the actuarial role. And the actuarial role, I mean, I was a nerd, mathematics nerd, and but I had a sort of urge to actually get into the management role as well, more to understand, how the whole business works, not just the actuarial part of the business. And so just slowly as I went through, I think I qualified as an I can't remember when I qualified as an actuary. I think it was 7 years after my qualification, my degree. I was with what was called Towers Perrin then, and I moved and worked and set up the Mercer office in Queensland, and was therefore a manager and the actuary, and I imported an actuary as well. So I sort of got my first step into management. And then I went to be the state manager for AMP and superannuation in Queensland. So I went to having 200 staff. I went from having 5 staff to 200 staff.
Wow.
And then AMP got McKinsey. So anyway, I struggled through and I was just terrible at public speaking and things. So I forced myself into public speaking courses and just to sort of get myself, because what I learned was is that management, you need, as a leader, you need to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to stand in front of people and people, trust you and
Mhm.
understand you. And you've got to be able to stand across quite complex messages sometimes. So AMP got McKinsey in, and I was promoted to state manager of Queensland of AMP at
Wow.
about 29. So I had 800 staff. I had a video studio where I used to go down once a week in front of and broadcast these messages across the state in front of this video studio. It's crazy. I used to sort of kiss babies and launch ships. And it was just an amazing job. But then it was an unreal, it was not real because it was sort of came home to roost that life companies shouldn't be doing that sort of thing. So I moved to Sydney and worked senior in AMP management, and then moved in back into consulting with what was then called Trowbridge Consulting, and then moved on to strategy consulting with Accenture. So I was a strategy partner with them, which was a completely different world. The actuarial skill sort of carried me through because um, I understood profit and I understood capital. And there aren't many people actually in the business world who really understand those two elements.
Yeah.
And so that just drove me through, and I just became better at communicating because it was survival of the fittest,
Hmm.
and you had to be good at it or die.
Yeah.
And so I went through and then ran a few other businesses post that. But I was always close to the Actuaries Institute. I used to be on committees, and I guess part of it was because I felt it was my tribe. I mean, if you looked at my career, the one thing that's sort of been constant is the profession. And whilst I don't use much of I mean, I wouldn't be allowed anywhere near an Excel spreadsheet now. Well, if I opened an Excel spreadsheet, there'd be an alarm going off at the Actuaries Institute. It's just, and I'm not allowed anywhere near the golden pen. But I still am proud to call myself an actuary, and I still use that term. And I still feel like I've got a tribal connection to the institute, and so that's how I connect. That's how I was always involved with the
Okay.
Actuaries Institute.
Well, it's a remarkable range of roles and a
Yeah,
remarkable career path. But I think the one that struck me is quite extraordinary. You were responsible for 800 people when you were 29.
for a short while, for a
Wow,
short period of time.
not bad for a self-described nerdy
No, and
actuary.
in fact, I was also responsible. So when McKinsey decided that we had to sack 600 of the 800 because we were centralising processing to
Hmm.
Sydney, that was also my job to do that, which was pretty awful.
Yeah,
And I learned. I mean, it's about you got to understand the human context of some of this stuff. And these were people with good people with families and kids and parents, and I really struggled with that part of it to understand, just that because I built a connection with them, and you just got to be professional in how you manage these things. So, and it was like that episode. I'm not sure if you used to watch The Office. It was sort of a satirical thing
oh,
where
I'm
the guy,
familiar with it, but I haven't seen it. Go on.
yeah, so the guy gets up in front of the team and said, "Well, the bad news is, you're being made redundant, but the good news is I've got the promotion," and, that's what it was like. I got promoted to Sydney, so it was awful. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like a comedy thing, really. It was just awful, like some corporate how it works in corporates. That's just how it works, which is why I felt more comfortable in consulting, really. And
So let's come to the role of president. So what was amongst all of that, what was your day job when you were first president in 2011?
right, so I'd blown myself up and worn myself down through all my that sort of commercial stuff. So I basically set up my own consulting business,
Oh, okay.
and
Right.
I had two or three major clients I was consulting to. So it's a full-time job. But it just gave me a bit of space, and
Okay.
it gave me the ability to control my diary.
Sure.
And I was actually on council at the time, so I sort of working my way through. And I was asked if I wanted to be in the line for president, and I just felt that the time was right. And I've always felt that I was never up to the job, but I like to push myself a bit.
Sure.
And we do. I mean, the Actors Institute does good work. There are good people. We're doing important stuff, and being president is a great thing. So I did it. I mean, it's partly putting back into the profession, but it's also a selfish aspect.
So
Um,
let's think about that. So when you did put up your hand, what motivated you to take on the role of president?
it was just so what I say to people when they talk to me about it is that there's a putting back into the profession. That's an important thing, but it's a big chunk of your time,
Sure.
and it could be 30 or 40% of your time. It shouldn't be more than 50 because if it is, you're getting in the way. But it's a fair chunk of your time. And what I tell people is you're allowed to be a bit selfish. You're allowed to do this because you want to. It's a good experience. It was a good experience for me in being in a leadership role, chairing a board. It was a good experience for me to get access to government to understand how
Hmm.
all big organisations work. So it was partly a selfish thing and partly a altruistic thing about putting back into the profession.
Okay. Oh, it's very open of you to
Yeah,
bring together the selfish and the altruistic. So what leadership skills, and you obviously had exercised and developed quite a few by that stage. What were the specific leadership skills that you think were required in your presidential year?
right. So it reminded me of being in consulting. So in consulting, it's safe to make an assumption that most of the people that work for you are smarter than you are. And if you don't make that assumption, it's a dangerous position to be in.
Sure.
And so I assumed that on council. I looked around the table. I thought, most of these guys are smarter than I am. Therefore, what skills do I have to do? How can I add to that? And basically, the role of the chair, the role of the president, maybe we talk about the difference between the
Yeah.
president and the chair, but the role of the chair of an organization like the Institute is to bring the best out of the team.
Hmm.
So my job was to make sure there was sort of that the stuff that came to the board, the board can have a discussion and make a decision on. I mean, the role of a board is to make decisions,
Hmm.
and so a big part of my role was to make sure that we had the information to make the decisions, and that the environment was right to make the decisions, and that people could have their say. And so I felt that was sort of the key role was just to clear the
Hmm.
street to make sure that everybody had a clear runway and you could bring the best out of everybody, which
Okay.
is tricky because you got different personalities, different
Sure.
styles. whilst you could argue that the Actors Institute board, is it diversified? Well, there's lots of men and women and lots of different cultures, but we all
Mm,
still read the same textbook. So there's an
mm,
argument about whether we were really diversified. But we were. I mean, I thought we were I mean, it still is a very good diversified commercial board that operates properly, that treats people with respect, and that coming to a board meeting is a safe place to be.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
sit there and if you've got a problem, you can say it. And that's how I felt. So that's how I felt it went. Now, the difference between chair and president
yeah,
actually
please.
is interesting because um, the Actors Institute's a professional association. But being the chair of the board, there's a corporation there as well. So there's actually legal responsibilities about running a business, the Actors
Mm,
Institute, signing off on
mm,
statutory accounts, and all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of one part of being a director. The other part of being president is there's a professional element to it. We want to enhance the profession. We want to make sure the profession's noticed. We want to bring through professionals into the profession, that sort of thing. So there is quite two distinct, different roles.
mhm,
And um, and I found the sort of encouraging new members. And I mean, when you and I were doing the professionalism course, every year we would see a new bunch of actors come through who were smarter than the year before. Oh, it was just amazing how sort of the hurdles lift
mm,
every year. And that's how I felt. And that's why I enjoyed going out and meeting,
sure.
new people coming through and encouraging people to join the profession.
Okay. So interesting, you differentiated the leadership as chair of the board versus president of the profession. Just given you've got a lot of experience with Institute of Company Directors, how do you identify the specific leadership skills for chairing a board, or in this case,
Yeah.
the president and council?
Yeah. So the bit of my career I didn't talk about before was what my day job currently is. I do governance training for the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So we do 5 day courses, and I do a governance day on that and finance day, and I do training for not-for-profit
Mhm.
boards. Not-for-profit boards far more complicated than for-profit boards. But the role of the chair is similar in all of those. The role of the chair is to bring the best out of the team. And the thing about the chair is first amongst equals. So the chair cannot think of themselves as the boss. Okay, they're there, they're at a board meeting. It's very different to a management meeting. If you're in a management meeting and we all have a discussion, the boss makes the decision. In a board meeting, you take a vote. You literally take a vote, and the chair gets one vote. And so the whole dynamics of how boards work is very different, and it's the chair's role to sort of to manage that. But there's power that comes from being the chair, and you can use that power for good, and you can use it for evil. And the power that comes from being the chair is that normally when you speak, it carries more weight than when anybody else speaks. And so you got to be careful how you use that.
Yes.
So when you have a group of people, you don't want them to know what you think until other people have started to have a discussion, because you get this whole group think
Yep.
issue. The other power the chair has is they frame the discussion. And so I remember sitting down with this, I hate to admit it, you'd sit down with the CEO before the board meeting. We have papers that are coming to the board for decision. And I'd think to myself, okay, how can I present this? How can I frame this in a way that will make the decision easier?
Yep. Yep.
So you can see how I'm actually putting a bias, locking a bias in right from the get-go, because the way the chair presents stuff, the way the chair frames things,
Mhm.
actually does influence how things go.
Yep.
And so the chair's going to be very careful about how they do that.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah, that's sort of that's the role of the chair, I think, and to manage disputes and to keep the culture safe, and just to make sure they've got the information. And you're often the link with the CEO. So the CEO, you and the chair and the CEO, are often the key link
Okay.
between the board and the management team.
Okay, that's fascinating, especially the difference between the two. And so it's one thing that's been a bit of a theme about really assuming that the people that you're working with are smarter than you. It requires a certain humility, which doesn't come naturally to some people.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on the humility or the source or the skill in being able to just no, let's what was your word? Create a space, make the street clear for these people. What's your tip on that?
Well, I think it is that you've got to know where people are coming from. And so there's a level of empathy you've got to have for people. And when you walk into a room of actuaries, and I say to people actually when I do the course and I introduce myself, and I say to the people, if I was on your board, how would you convince me to do stuff?
Yeah, yeah,
And what do they say? Give you the numbers, logic, and rationality. And that's true. When I look at the world, I look at it through the world of logic, rationality, and numbers. And you look at a board, and it's often not like that. Often people, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but often there's a legitimately different way of looking at the
mhm,
world. You know, you've
mhm,
got people, you've
mhm.
got culture, you've got society, you've got expectations in your, in the organization and outside the organization. And you've got to have a window for that.
Yeah,
And probably the best example. So I was president of 2011, but I was also president 2018 for half a year. And this was a good example about that joke about, when you ask for volunteers, you don't make eye contact. And so what was happening was we were sitting around this board table. The president had just resigned and halfway through 2018. And this was in the middle of the Banking Royal Commission. Now, the temperature was high then on the actuarial profession. Two actuaries had already been up in the witness box admitting to things, not that had done anything wrong, but their organizations or whatever, they were admitting to things. And the heat was on the profession that maybe the profession could get dragged into this thing because they were talking about insurance products and they were badly designed. And we were the ones that signed up on them.
sure.
And so there was a real issue in the profession about getting caught up. So anyway, the president resigned halfway through, and they said, "Well, we got to finish off this year." Nicolette Rubinstein had been appointed as being the president the next year, but she didn't have the capacity to do it that year. So anyway, I looked up and somebody said, "Oh, you're looking." So they picked me as being the president for half a year, and I was happy to do it. But what I found then was that, and and I had to be press trained in case the press were called in to
Mhm.
interview the actors about blah blah. But one of the other things that happened in that year was we had to make a decision about the International Actuarial Association conference.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we put our hand up and bid for that. We won the bid. It was to be held a year after, I think 2019, 2020, something like that. And what had happened was the money had just blown out and COVID was still hanging around. And the question for us was, how do we make a decision on this? And um, I had a view, and the view was we should can it. And I can remember we had a meeting. And so what happened was there was an anti-can meeting, an anti-can group and a pro-can group. And my view was we should can it because the risks were too high. And we could have face savingly got away with canning it.
Mhm.
And so, but what happened was we had the meeting, and I can remember a group of senior actors came in who were passionate for the thing to be held, and they gave such a compelling argument about how we should manage the risks and
Mhm.
everything else that I agreed with them.
Right.
And so it was actually so when you say how do you manage these things, you actually give people the space to be able
Yeah,
to present things in a way. And what this group did was they wasn't just at the meeting, but they prep people. They spoke to me in advance of the meeting. They spoke to other directors in
yeah,
advance of the
yeah.
meeting, and you're allowed to do that.
Of course.
And what they did was just warmed them up.
Yeah,
And the big lesson for me from that was that if you give people a space to do things, you can change your mind. So
yeah,
when you walk into a board meeting, you've got to have read the papers, you've got to have a view about things, but it's got to be loosely held.
yeah, yeah.
And you've got to have an open mind to having different ideas that can come up in a logical, rational discussion
Yeah, great
from that.
lesson.
Yeah, that
Great
was a
lesson.
fantastic lesson, and we had it, and it was a brilliant success.
Yeah.
So
Loosely held opinions.
yeah,
Yeah.
firm. Yeah. So what do we say? We say they're firm opinions, loosely held.
So just given the environment 2018, especially Banking Royal Commission, a little bit upheaval, what specific leadership skills do you think were important for you playing president in the second half of 2018?
I think just to hold your nerve, understand risks, and the vision. And so when we talk to boards, the role of the board is to be laser focused on your strategy.
Yeah.
Because any board meeting we have, we get stuff that comes in from left field all the time, and everything sounds like a good idea. And so the challenge for the board is you've got to be absolutely laser focused on what is your strategy and how you're going to achieve it. What's your vision? And our vision's all our purpose has been about public interest. So the role of the profession is operate in the public interest.
Mm-hmm.
Now that might seem counterintuitive to running a business or whatever, but the reality is it's actually if you build your strategy around that and you set your profile around that, that actually sets the scene. That actually helps you make decisions. Having a set of values and a clear vision is a way of prioritizing, the good stuff from the interesting stuff.
Yeah. So that's brings together quite a few concepts there. The importance of vision, the importance of values, but as you said, that laser-like view on strategy. So, what's the skill in being clear in articulating the strategy? Because it's hard for everybody to be kind of laser-like if it's a
Yeah,
bit vague. So, what's your tip on making that strategy crystal clear?
yeah. So we had a conference at AICD, and the chair of CBA Bank, Catherine Livingston, gave a presentation.
Yep.
So she's one of our top chairs, very successful CEO, very well respected. And she said the Commonwealth Bank has a strategy on a page. And this was really interesting to me because the point she was making was you can't just have a 20-page strategy you keep in the bottom drawer. Your strategy has got to be something. If you can't put it, you've got to put it on a page. It's got to be that simple and that straightforward that it's on a page. And the highlight of the strategy is what's the light on the hill. So
Right.
why are we here? What's the primary purpose for our organization? And that's just a sentence. And so once you've got that sentence out there, and I can't remember what the Actuaries is at the moment, but it's things like data for good. I mean,
Mhm.
something like that, which is actually a really powerful
Yeah. Yeah.
statement. I can't remember the exact wordings, but that's the sort of
That's right.
gist of it.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing to say. So whenever you're talking about anything, okay, so what does it fit that? And so when you communicate strategy, you've got to communicate it in a way that actually it's an emotional statement.
Mm.
You've got to tap into somebody's emotion. Think,
Yeah.
crikey, that's right, because it's we're logical, rational beings theoretically, but the reality is we're not. We're emotional beings that are driven by emotions.
Yeah.
And if you're anything like me, you make an emotional decision and you try and backwardly justify it by logic and rationality. But the reality is we're instinctive creatures.
Yeah.
And the strategy has got to be an emotional discussion. And it's got to be started off with a vision and a purpose and a set of values that make it clear. And
Yeah.
you do it on one page, and that's the way you talk about them.
Yeah. And I think if I'm hearing it correctly, that sense of purpose has got to have an emotional attachment to it,
It
can't it?
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. So when I work with not-for-profits, invariably their purpose, if they achieve their purpose, they're out of business. So it's things like no kid shall live in poverty, or it's things like
Mhm.
justice for all. So they have a very high, which is unachievable. But what they do is that's their vision. So and then everything builds around that. And they're similar for what we want. Data for good
Yeah.
is a good vision. And so any company you're with, any organization where the board needs to have a very solid vision. Otherwise, you just flop around
Yeah.
and you can't make decisions.
Yeah. Wow. So, Barry, we've traversed a lot of territory in different leadership skills in the two very different environments that you were present. We might wrap up with a question we ask everybody. What's your top tip for actuaries who are aspiring to leadership roles?
Right. Um, hmm. So get your head out of your book and understand that when you walk into a room, you got to look at every individual in that room. If you're in there to have a debate, or it could be a management meeting or some social group you're part of, every individual there has a different way of looking at the world. And their way is no more or less justified in the way you look at it. So a key skill of leadership is actually trying to understand what their view of the world is. And the way you get that is to listen to stories. listen to what they listen to their story. What drives them, what motivates them, what success looks like for them, how they emotionally connected with the world. And it's like reading a novel. I mean, when you read a bit of fiction, that's a window into a world that you're not normally in. And I think I mean, it's good for actors to get into leadership roles because you can't work as a sole trader. You got to in your career, to be successful in your career, you've got to mix with other people, you've got to talk to other people, you've got to have other people working for you, because otherwise you're going to spend all your life just doing the numbers. So if you think of it that way, you are going to be successful as an actuary. Being a leader is actually a central part of that. And the way you do that is to not just mix with actuaries, but mix with other people, but just to understand where they're coming from and what motivates them and how you influence them.
Yeah.
How do you influence somebody to a point of view that you've got in a way that they can accept and they don't feel threatened about?
Okay. So, Barry, it's really interesting the way you describe it. It's more than mixing with, it's more than working with. It's probably even above understanding the idea of really listening to their stories. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very powerful advice.
yeah. Which means that takes time. You've got to be an active
Sure.
listener.
Yeah.
It takes time. And it's like anything, it's like getting into a political conversation or religious conversation or a conversation which is sort of fraught with risk. It's just good to be quiet and just to listen to people's perspective without judging or
Mm.
because we have, anybody in the actuarial profession is going to be, on the spectrum of being a good person. And if you get to being president or get to being on the board, there are good people there with completely different backgrounds and legitimate points of view, different ages, different backgrounds, and it's a challenging environment. And it's good to use the Actuaries Institute, get on committees, put
Yeah.
time in, work for it. Because as I said before, you're allowed to do that and not just do it altruistically. You're doing it to help yourself, to you getting exposure to other people. But you're just doing it to sort of contribute back and then get the benefits of that.
Well, we might wrap up there with that excellent invitation for people to contribute, to be involved, and with your optimistic view that you know, this profession is full of good people. So, Barry, it has been a treat chatting today. Thank you very much.
It's a
Appreciate your
pleasure.
time.
Thanks, Martin. Good seeing you again.